Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning.
Welcome.
Morning.
So let's see. We'll give it a minute or two for anybody else who'd like to join. Obviously, people can come in when they like. So once again, good morning and welcome or welcome back to those we who have perhaps joined us before or are joining us for the first time. It is a lovely day where I am. I hope it is a nice day where you are as well. Um, Couple of general uh, housekeeping bits before we go into today's topic. First of all, if you have not yet been getting emails from me, if you haven't gotten any emails from me, please include your email in the chat so that I can include them. Now, I didn't send an email this week because I actually found something else that a different chart that I would like to send. I was going to send a particular chart based on what we talked about last time, but I found something better. So I'm going to be sending that out as well as links, what have you. We're going to be doing a couple of different things today. What we're going to center on is Jewish law. And I know we've been talking about Jewish law sometimes in the abstract, sometimes in specific over the last little bit, but really what I have wanted to do is try to enforce or reinforce this idea that Jewish law is something that has developed over thousands of years and, in my view, certainly continues to develop over time. So, a couple of classes ago, we talked about what's in the Torah, what's in the Tanakh. We also talked about last time how we went from the Tanakh to the Talmud. And now we're going to talk about how the ideas from the Talmud got transferred to a uh, complex system of what's called halakha. Halakha is the Hebrew word essentially for Jewish law. Um, Halakha literally means path. So it's the pathway that one goes on while trying to live a Jewish life. The idea is to go down a certain path in which uh, following Jewish law is sort of a part of our everyday activities. That's kind of the idea behind it. So, um, anyway, so that's what we're going to be talking about today, but we're going to touch on a couple of other things. First of all, I want to do um, a bit of free advertising for a group. They're not giving me any money. I'm not requesting any money from them, but it is the basis of it's a source for me for so much of what I use in terms of any kind of Jewish text. So I want to share that with you in just a moment. So probably easier to just share my screen on this one. Okay. So can everybody see what I just put up there? where it says browse the library. Just speak up if you can't see it. How about that? Okay. So if everybody can see it, then terrific.
Can you make
Um,
it bigger?
well, I make it bigger. Let's see. Uh, let's see. I can make individual pages bigger. Which I will do momentarily. Um, but I don't think I can. Well, can I make no, not on, so sorry, not on this particular screen, but I will when I show examples, I can make the text much
It's
bigger.
okay. I'm just old and blind.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. So this is actually, I mean, to be quite specific, this is from an app. It's also a website known as Safaria. Safaria is spelled Sefaria. And if you want to look up Safaria on a web browser, you do safaria.org. O-R-G. Safaria.org is a monumental development in terms of the everyday access to Jewish text. Obviously, the fact that it's web-based, you might say, well, so many things are web-based, and that used to not be web-based because there wasn't a web years ago. So what's the big deal? The big deal has to do with the fact that this was achieved even at all. Um, Essentially, this free service, right? It's absolutely free. Now, they do ask for donations. They are a nonprofit, and I actually do donate to them. Um, Whether other people do, that's up to you. But it is, I mean, and I'm not trying to say that this replaces any actual books. If you like the feel and look of a traditional book, by all means, you can still have that, and I do still have some actual paper books. But the idea that we can have access to every single Jewish text that you can probably even imagine in one site. When I was in rabbinical school 20, 25 years ago, they actually there was a CD-ROM. I know it's a very old-fashioned idea, but a CD-ROM that you could purchase that had pretty much any Jewish text that you could think of, only in Hebrew, and it cost probably about $1,000, if not more. So you'd have to decide, do you want to have a CD-ROM that costs $1,000, or do you want to just go with books? Again, nothing wrong with just going with books. But then Safaria came out, and then all of a sudden, you had all these texts, many of them translated into English, some of them translated into multiple languages at your fingertips. So, for instance, let's say you want to start with just the very beginning of it. The beginning of the book of Genesis. Okay, well, what I've now put on the screen is, the beginning of the book of Genesis in English. But first of all, let's say I want to increase the size of the font. I can do that. Okay, so now it's bigger. And now I say, but wait a second. What about Hebrew? Now I've got the Hebrew and the English next door. But what if I want to find out a little bit more about an individual verse? Well, you can click on the verse. Okay. And here you have, first of all, access to numerous translations. So many different options you have, including, oh, I don't know, Spanish, German, Finnish, French, Esperanto, Italian, Polish, Russian, Farsi, Portuguese. I mean, it just goes on, right? All of these different translations you want. Um, so that's one thing you can add. Now, I'm not saying that every single text in Safaria has translations into all these different languages. The Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, is obviously going to have, probably more than a lot of those things. But let's say you want to look at, well, what do some famous Jewish commentators have to say about this verse? Well, you got a bunch at your fingertips, including if you see on the right-hand side, it says where it says EN, that means that these are Hebrew texts that have been translated into English. So you can read about the commentaries of a lot of different people. So, for instance, let's take this first one. This is the commentary of Rashi, who is was a very popular Torah commentator. And here's what he has to say about it. He has a lot to say about this. He doesn't always have this much to say about any particular verse of the Torah, but obviously I picked a very popular one, the very first. So you can look at a commentary on this. You can also say, when, we talked about the Talmud, right? When has this text been cited, been mentioned in the Talmud? Oh, turns out a lot. Again, it's a very popular text. So here's an example of when this text, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, is mentioned in the Talmud. This is one of many examples of that. Now, this also has and you can look at all these other, other books, which we'll get into some of these today. But this also is a collection. Safari is also a collection of a bunch of different people who have contributed educational lessons on these things. So when it says sheets, let's take a look at sheets. Here are all these different people who have created lessons, source sheets that have included this verse. So if you want to say, hey, I want to know more about all of this, I want to learn what other modern thinkers and teachers have to say about this. Well, here's a bunch of examples. Somebody wrote something about, does the Torah believe in aliens? Let's click on that for a second. I don't know who this person is, but this is one that comes from that includes this first verse of the Torah. So to say that there's a lot in Safaria is putting it mildly. So again, Safaria is a free app, and safaria.org is a website that you can go to. Again, you can access all of this for free. And it goes in many different directions. So anyway, I use Safaria often in classes that I teach, when I'm doing research. It's really, really terrific. And it's also an absolutely groundbreaking thing. So any questions about Safaria, at least for the time being? Or anything else you're wondering about at the moment? Okay, Appreciate. All right. So anyway, I wanted to let you know about that because again, this is a tool that I will use from time to time when teaching about this. So it's very useful. So now I want to talk about the idea of Jewish law. What exactly is Jewish law when it comes down to it? The answer is, like a lot of things in Judaism, kind of complicated. But I'm going to offer you as straightforward of an interpretation as I can. And again, it has to do with this word that I mentioned a little bit ago, halacha. Halacha meaning pathway, um, basically the way to go. And the Tanakh, and actually specifically the Torah, is it's many things, as I think I talked about a couple of weeks ago. It's a story of the initial experiences of the Jewish people and the relationship with God. It is a matter of record, of recording a bunch of things, a bunch of information, some of it not necessarily being the most entertaining thing to read, but just a bunch of lists of, just sort of just making sure that there is a solid public record of that time or, of that story. And then the Torah is a book of laws. Those laws are initially brought to the fore by the Torah, referred to in numerous ways in other books of the Tanakh. But then, as I talked about last week, the Talmud represented a time block of about 500 years, maybe more, in which these initial rabbis made a point of saying, okay, well, it says observe this law. What does that mean in practical terms? I used the example, I believe, last week about Shabbat. The Torah says only a few things about what it means to not work on Shabbat. The rabbis went through a bunch of other different scenarios about how does one keep Shabbat. But here's the thing. The Talmud, for all of its greatness, for all of the remarkable things that it does, rarely, if ever, gives you a straight definitive answer about how to do things. Or maybe sometimes it tries to, but then you have another rabbi saying, but no, I do things a little differently. Or I disagree with this way of looking at it. So it was left to a number of people in ensuing generations to try to sort that out. So what happens historically over the following, I would say, let's call it 600 or so years. You have the period of time from, let's say, about 500 to maybe 1100 of the Common Era. Again, very general ideas. You have these Gaonim, right? But before we get to the Gaonim, there is one thing that we generally do agree on based on the Torah. And that idea is that how many commandments are there in Judaism? I'll give you a hint. It's way more than 10.
613.
613. Very good. There are 613 commandments. Now, at no point does the Torah, does a statement from God say, hey guys, here's here's the 613 commandments. You guys got it, right? No. 613 commandments is essentially the generally agreed upon interpretation of how many actual laws there are. Generally agreed upon by rabbinic sources. Now, by the way, there are different lists about what exactly the 613 are. In other words, some people count some things as two commandments. Some people combine a couple of them as one. Some people say, oh, no, that's actually a commandment. But for whatever reason, 613 became the number that everybody was trying to get to. So I imagine that a lot of you may be thinking, okay, well, just follow the 613 commandments and, then you're doing your job, right? Way easier said than done. Even if you say, okay, I'm gonna, you know what, there are different lists of what the 613 commandments. I'm just going to pick one list that I like and follow that. Perfectly reasonable response. Even then, you're going to have a couple of challenges. One of the challenges is that when they interpret the 613 commandments, there is a chunk of those commandments, there's a good number of those commandments that have to do with sacrificial offerings, because those are, important commandments in the Torah. As we've talked about before, I'm pretty sure, once the temple was destroyed, certainly once the second temple was destroyed, the most recent one, no more sacrificial offerings. So there is a decent number of the commandments that simply do not apply today. So nobody can do all 613 today. But then you can say to yourself, all right, well, I guess those don't apply anymore. So I'll just do the rest of them. It's really hard to do the rest of them. The idea is that life as a Jew who cares about halacha is frankly the pursuit of the commandments. It's the pursuit to do as much as you can. No one can do it all. The idea is to do as much as you're able. I do want to share at least the beginning of a list, and I can, link this to you at another point. Let me share my screen again. Okay. We have this list of the 613 mitzvot. Okay, this is a website called Judaism 101. And we have this list, and you can see that this is based primarily on a list by Rambam. Now, the Rambam is one of the great Jewish thinkers of all time. His name was Moses Maimonides. Rambam was an acronym that stands for Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, but he's commonly known as Rambam. And this is the most widely accepted list, but not the only one. And so what Maimonides tried to do was to say, all right, what are the 613? And the Rambam goes through it and lists 613. Ideas about God, about the Torah, signs and symbols, prayers and blessings, love and brotherhood, etc. I mean, these are all part of it. Now, some of these things are very straightforward. In other words, if you want to look at number one, to know that God exists, okay? Well, that seems to be one of those commandments where either you do or you don't. Go to number five, not to profane God's name, not to take God's name in vain. Well, can we all say that we have never done that? It's pretty hard to do that all the time. Look at number 10, to imitate God's good and upright ways. Well, sometimes we have good days and sometimes we have not so good days. It's really hard to do all of this perfectly. It's impossible, I would say, or implausible at the very least. Um, you go to this idea of, loving all human beings. Number 26, loving all human beings who are of the covenant. Do we do that perfectly? I can't imagine that any of us does. But the idea is that we try to. The idea is that every day we are trying to do so. It is a constant pursuit to do so. So there are numerous different rules. Some of these are times and seasons having to do with holidays. We have the dietary laws, business practices, how we treat other employees, vows. It goes on and on, right? What we do with, in civil cases, criminal cases, prophecy, idolatry. I mean, like you can tell it just goes on and on. We don't have time to go through it all, but I figured this can be one way to just enumerate the incredible scope of what the 613 commandments are. Do you have questions about this at the moment? Okay. So there's a
I
lot.
do. Wait a minute, Rabbi. Okay.
Please.
I don't quite know how to articulate this, but like, is there some being sitting in judgment? Oh, Catherine, today you did 5, and yesterday you did none, and this and that. And where does that put me or an individual on the scale of, I don't know, how Jewish are you, or is that not even a thing?
So it's have you ever seen the show The Good Place?
Yeah, I think so. I've heard of it.
Okay. The Good Place is my favorite all-time television show. And part of what is, and by the way, it is not it does not belong to any religion. I still want to do an adult education class in The Good Place because some of the ideas are just incredible. But The Good Place is like it's a sitcom about the afterlife,
Oh,
and what it does is that it has this idea that you have like a point system in which every action that a that we everything we do on Earth has a positive or negative point value, depending on how ethical or unethical it is. And the idea is that you total up the points, and based on how you do, you either go to the good place or the bad place. Um, after one dies. So that's part of the premise of the show. Oh, defending your life. I haven't seen that. Defending your life. That's a movie, right? So those are some theories about that. Um, are there? Oh, there was a discussion on The Good Place. Okay, yeah, no, it's a fantastic show, and I mean, one day I'd love to delve into it and in a group format because I just think it's brilliant. Um, so is there somebody out there who is, keeping track of all the points? It depends on your view of, frankly, of the afterlife, which is a whole other topic. Jewish views on the afterlife is a whole other topic that I think ought to get to at some point. But even there is like no consensus about what the viewpoints are. Um, I think that there are times in which Jewish thinkers have referred to a system of, you know, reward for this, punishment for that. You get points for this, you don't get points for that, as a way to motivate people to do commandments. And I think it has to do, personally, I think this has to do with the different ways that the human mind can work. Some people need the structure of saying, okay, how many good things did I do today? How many not so good things did I do today? Am I doing more good than bad? Okay, right? Some people, I feel like they need that, and please understand, that's not a bad thing, right? I think some people just say like, all right, how many good things can I do today? Or how many ways can I follow the commandments today? I think that there are people who want to have that. Oh, I appreciate it, Steve. Thanks. Um, uh, some people like kind of need that way of like, that kind of structure. I think other people don't necessarily need that structure. Um, I'll put it this way. There was one time when I was in high school, I went to a Jewish day school through high school. There was one time in high school where where the student council, they were running we were having a Shabbat together, as a school, and the student council planned a program called "Who is the Best Jew?" And several people were basically playing a character, right? And one character is, I follow all the commandments. I follow as many commandments as I can. I'm devout. I'm learning all the time. I'm praying all the time. I'm very devout. The second person said, I'm not very religious, but I am charitable. I speak up for social justice. I help my fellow human being as much as I can. The third person says, I don't really do much of those other things, but I believe in helping the Jewish community. I am blessed with having a lot of money, and I give a lot of money to Jewish causes and to Jewish people. And then the fourth one said, I don't really do any of those other three things, but I live in Israel. And I fight for I fight for Israel. I fight for the Jewish people. And I fulfill that destiny with the Jewish people. And so these characters discussed among themselves why they were the best Jew. And the problem with the program is that they botched the end game. Because what they should have done at the end is we understood that we were going to have to vote on which one was the best Jew. The way they should have ended it is by saying, who's the best Jew? All of them. Right? And and more importantly, there's no such thing as any one Jew being better than anyone else.
So what did you vote on? What was the winner?
The winner was the person who lives in Israel.
That surprises me.
That was that was the one who won my school's votes.
Interesting.
The vote among our students.
What
And she
year
said
was that? Do you know?
1991.
Wow, there wasn't even a major war going on. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's
I mean,
always a war going on, but
it was in the immediate aftermath of the first Gulf War. But
right.
yeah.
Oh, that's right.
So but still it's like that was
Interesting.
that was the plurality of votes among the students. And then so they just said, okay, the one who lives in Israel wins the votes. And have a good night, everybody. And I said, no. Like that's not okay. It's not okay. We are not in a position to, first of all, like we as human beings should not, are not in a position to judge the validity of anybody's Jewish, how good or bad somebody's Jewish life is. It's not for us to judge. If we believe that's for God, that's for God to judge, okay. But we are not supposed to be taking that on. Um, and but the reason why I bring all that up, beyond saying the idea that there's no such thing as good Jew, bad Jew, right? We're just Jews. It's the idea that there are many ways to contribute positively to the Jewish world and to Jewish life. I often say that when it comes to being a part of a synagogue, do I wish that everyone is active in all facets of synagogue life? Of course. That'd be great. Do I know that there are certain people that really put a lot of their energy into attending services and doing ritual? And are there some people who uh, who really concentrate on educational programming and learning? Are there some people who really are interested in matters of social justice and tzedakah, charity? Are there certain people who want to concentrate on advocacy for Israel and fighting anti-Semitism? Are there certain people who maybe don't do any of those prior things, but they say, through my financial contributions, I help to sustain the good work of the community? There are many doors in which to enter a synagogue and to feel part of things. And people can go through multiple doors. Obviously, I encourage as many as one can. But like to me, it's like it's all I take a very glass half full look at it. Like it all helps to fill the cup. And I would say the same thing about halakha, about Jewish law, that every day, every time you do a mitzvah, every time you do one of the commandments, well, that's one more that you did that you didn't, that maybe you didn't do yesterday, you know? Or it's one way that you are honoring our tradition and honoring what, as our tradition states, that God is asking of us. Is there a test? So we go get Catherine, going back to your question. I know I've kind of gone in a bunch of different directions. Is there a test? Is there a point system? Well, there certainly isn't one on Earth. Or if there is, if somebody decides that they're going to make a test, they shouldn't be doing that because it's not for us to cast judgments on what kind of Jew somebody is. I will say, though, that there are certain negative behaviors that one can say, you know, this is not what Judaism stands for, right? In other words, um, and I think you're usually talking about matters of ethical importance, right? Um, for instance, there is an issue. I mean, this is a very specific example, but there is an issue among some, sometimes where a Jewish marriage will be held hostage by a man who refuses to give uh, a uh, refuses to give a divorce to his wife. According to ancient traditions, which are, maintained by a lot of people today, only the male partner in a male-female marriage can, only the male partner can deliver a uh, certificate of divorce. And there are issues, and there continue to be issues sometimes with men who say, I'm just not going to give it. I'm going to basically punish this woman by not giving it. And he then, can, does what he wants to do. And this woman will then be in a position where if she tries to start a relationship with another man, she'll be accused of adultery. That's using the technicalities of Jewish law to hurt somebody else. I feel pretty confident in being able to say that that's not what Judaism should stand for. That's not what Judaism should stand for. I think that you can do that when it comes to ethical matters. When it comes to ritual matters, that's really not for us to say, right? For me to say that, oh, you don't pray enough, you don't study Torah enough, you don't, you know, um, you know, you're not your standards of keeping kosher are not good enough. I'm talking about as individuals, right? You can set policies as a synagogue as to what a synagogue requires. But in terms of any individual's or any family's behavior when it comes to ritual matters, it's not for me to say. It's not for anybody to say, frankly. Does that help? Okay. I know. I mean, a long answer, but it was but a big question, to be fair, and a good one. Um, other questions about of halacha. I can get into. I do want to show you like a couple of halachic texts that kind of go into, what it means to actually kind of codify halacha. But any other questions at the moment? Yeah, Linda.
So you were talking about the get, and only the man can get the get. So I got a get, and I understand that the man is setting you free so you can, be free to marry. And my religious uncle, like a Siddiq uncle in New York, well, he's like a rabbi. He wanted me to get a get to be good everywhere, and then I would have married someone who wasn't Jewish.
I mean, yeah, some people have that's their workaround is that they say, okay, well, I'm not gonna, it's like if I'm not gonna give a get or if I'm not, so a get meaning a Jewish certificate of divorce. Um, that if I'm not going to to give a get to my wife, and if I don't, or if I'm a woman who doesn't receive that certificate of divorce, the solution for some is, well, I guess I'll have to marry somebody who isn't Jewish, and therefore you're not in
Anyway.
therefore you're not in violation of Jewish law. Um, and, and listen, that can be one way to do it. The challenge is, what if you're somebody who wants to marry a Jew, wants to remarry a Jew? That becomes, so that's a difficult circumstance. So
Rabbi, has
yeah.
there been any discussion? I know that the rabbis get together and they write responses where they change halakha. Has there been any discussion over the past, say, 25 years to change that so that the woman can ask for the get and not the man?
So, it's an excellent question. So, okay. So I'll try to work through this. In the Reform movement, a get is not necessarily required. In the Reform movement, a civil divorce suffices for. In other words, it's like if you have a civil divorce, then they're not worried about that. Okay, that's at least that's my understanding of where Reform Judaism is. In the conservative movement, so there's an interesting story about this. There was a wonderful teacher, I think from the 1960s, 1970s, I think, named Rabbi Saul Lieberman, who was sort of like the leading thinker of Jewish law of the conservative movement. And he saw this whole marriage question and says, this is a problem. How can we make it so that we don't upend the traditional law, but still make it so that it's better for the woman? And what he came up with, he actually worked in tandem with an Orthodox rabbi named whose last name was Soloveitchik. Rabbis Lieberman and Soloveitchik came up with something that you could add to the text of the marriage contract that essentially says, if this marriage dissolves in a civil case, and if a get has not been delivered within 6 months, the woman is allowed to bring that case to a Beit Din, a court of rabbis, and assuming they find merit in the explanation, this Beit Din can annul the marriage. And so and as long as you have that in the Jewish wedding contract, then the idea is that you have that the woman has that protection. When I officiate weddings, I always insist that they have that clause in the in the Jewish wedding contract, in the ketubah. I always insist on that, and I always tell the couple who are in love with each other, I say, you should, I hope you never need this. I hope this never, I hope you have a wonderful, full life together. I hope you never need this. But I want to have this in there as a statement of protection of the woman. So that clause that's added to the ketubah is now called the Lieberman clause. It was going to be called the Lieberman-Soloveitchik clause, or the Soloveitchik-Lieberman clause. However, Rabbi Soloveitchik had to back out of aligning himself with it because of political pressure among Orthodox colleagues. But it was approved through the conservative. So that's how the conservative movement deals with it.
And
So,
does everybody pretty much do that in the conservative movement? Is that your sense that most rabbis include that, or
I can't say everyone, but I would say it's pretty widespread.
pretty much, yeah. Interesting.
I mean, pretty much. There is another way of doing it there's another thing where the conservative movement says, okay, you don't have you can have the traditional ketubah, you don't add a clause to it, but like you have a document sort of separate from it that is what they call an antenup. And so that's actually when I was married, that was actually that's what we did. That was what we felt more comfortable with. And so, and that sort of sufficed. It turns out I wound up, it's like, I once my civil divorce was finalized, I ordered the get and had it done because it's like I feel like that's the honorable thing to do. That's what you should do. So and this is not to praise myself or anything like that. I mean, I think it's just the right thing to do, period. um okay, other questions? So briefly, I know we only have a few minutes, but again, look, if there's something that's unclear, please tell me, because I want to make sure that this is accessible for everybody. I'm going to go back to Safari, and I just want to give a couple of examples of uh, of Jewish law. Um, so this you have halacha. So um, the reason why these law codes are important is going back to what I said earlier. The Talmud, as much as it talks about laws, and it talks a great deal about laws, there are numerous times where they leave it kind of unclear as to what you're supposed to do in certain scenarios. Like, it's just not laid out very clearly, and it's certainly not laid out in an organized fashion. I think I mentioned last week that the Talmud is really into stream of consciousness. So during the Middle Ages and into the time of the Renaissance, Enlightenment, etc., there were numerous attempts, numerous efforts to come up with law codes. Essentially, here's everything. Here are the laws to follow in systematic order. The first of those was called, or at least the first major one, is called the Mishnah Torah. Now, the Mishnah Torah was put together by Moses Maimonides, who we talked about earlier. And so he goes through it and talks about just a bunch of different categories of what it means to observe Jewish law, including numerous of them having to do with sacrificial offerings. But criminal law, civil law, ritual law, all of that, it's all in there, or a bunch of things are in there. Now, what Maimonides said, and this was Maimonides was nothing if not bold. He said at one point in introducing the Mishnah Torah, I wanted to write a book that made it so that all you really needed in your library was the Torah and my book. This was not the most modest statement that one could make, but you have to respect his goals. I would say you have to respect that he had big dreams with this book. Now, the one that became the most well-known is the Shulchan Aruch. This was compiled by Rabbi Yosef Karo. The Shulchan Aruch essentially puts everything into four major categories. The first one is called Orach Chaim, which is ritual, sort of regular ritual observance, prayer, Shabbat, holidays. Then you have a section that is having to do with keeping kosher, what it takes to convert to Judaism, mourning, giving, tzedakah, charity, things like that. You have another one that is family law, and then another one that is interpersonal laws. So it's the most widely accepted. And again, these law codes are far more systematic than anything else that we have. Now, does that mean, but you saw, of course, in that there are numerous law codes because, look, you're never going to get unanimous agreement on just about anything in Judaism. There is a statement, some of you have heard, some of you perhaps not: 2 Jews, 3 opinions. To get Jews to agree on everything is almost impossible. A more recent statement, this was from a stand-up routine by Jon Stewart, the Daily Show host. This is before he hosted the Daily Show, but he said, and Jon Stewart is Jewish, and he said that, we understand, of course, that this anti-Semitic idea that Jews are trying to run the world is beyond absurd. How do I know that it's beyond absurd? We can't even agree where to have lunch, right? There is this idea that to live in an authentic Jewish community involves questioning, involves argument, involves debate. So, and this is one of the roles that a rabbi tries to do for a community, which is to be an arbiter of these arguments as best as he or she can, according to his or her level of Jewish knowledge and his or her philosophy on it. And when a congregation decides to hire a rabbi, what they look for, hopefully, one of the things they hopefully look for is somebody who has a similar point of view as to how Jewish day-to-day rituals and such should be operated. Like, in other words, a congregation should hire a rabbi, and a rabbi should look to work in a congregation where they're reasonably aligned on how to observe Jewish law, or at least what are the ideals that we are trying to shoot for. Catherine, you just mentioned about ambiguity being a big part of Jewish life. It is. Well, yes, your hand's raised.
Yeah, then who and how does it decide which one of these books you were listing just previously would be the one that's kind of the most accepted?
Excellent question. The Shulchan Aruch, I think it became sort of thought of as the law code par excellence. I think because of just I think that it became a go-to for many rabbis, and it became sort of the and what is it about the Shulchan Aruch that caused it? I think, it's the thoroughness. I think it's the sort of the what many people thought of as sort of a reasonable approach to Jewish life, as opposed to an extreme way approach, one way or the other. And also, even within the Shulchan Aruch, there are plenty of passages that say the standard way is to do this, but there are some who do it this way, and that's okay. Right? Not every rule is like this. It's not like they say the prevailing law is to not commit murder, but there are some who commit murder, and that's okay. That's not in there. Okay. So I'm not trying to say that everything in Judaism is willy-nilly, but I mean it is this. But certainly when it comes to ritual law, there's this idea of what is preferred or what is ideal, and then what is also acceptable and valid. Those are two different categories of rules in some cases. So anyway, I think the Shulchan Aruch has enough of that kind of flexibility that it kind of rose to the top of it, rose sort of to the top of the rankings, if you will. But there's no real, but so what I would say is that, like, so for instance, here I'll give just a shameless advertisement. On Wednesdays from 11:30 to 12:30, I do a lunch and learn on Zoom. It's the same link as the one you're using right now. And during that learning, we actually go through passages of the Shulchan Aruch. So if you want to delve, want to go, kind of deep into the Shulchan Aruch, or delve into some of the passages, and if you have time, I'd love to have you join us in our discussions of that. So Wednesdays from 11:30 to 12:30. We didn't have it this past week because I was otherwise occupied, but I'll be doing it this Wednesday and going forward. So anyway, hope that helps with that.
I think it's a different time this week, though, isn't it?
Um,
Or is it a different Wednesday this month that it's in September that it's a different time?
My plan is to do the normal time. I think so. Yeah. What's going to be different? What's going to be different in terms of this month is that there will be several weeks where we don't have it because there are several Wednesdays that are going to be Jewish holidays.
Holidays, yeah. In New News, it had 1 week listed as 12:30 to 2:30.
Okay. All right.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I'll check into that. I don't think that was my plan, but
I
so I'll check into it.
Yeah. I think that was a mistake.
Okay. All right. So we'll look into that. So in terms of what we are headed to next, normally I would go into Shabbat next, but due to the time of year we're in, I think it makes the most sense to get into holidays, specifically the fall holidays, because we are less than a month away from the beginning of the fall holiday season, or what I like to refer to in my own work as tax season, because that's it's the busiest time for rabbis. So I think it would be ordinarily I would go into Shabbat at this point, but I think going into holidays, specifically fall holidays, makes the most sense due to where we are on the calendar. So that's where we will pick up this coming Sunday. I thank you much, and as always, feel free to email me, and I will send an email with links and with the charts that we had from today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks.
Thanks so
Bye.
much.
Shkar.
Okay.